right, well, next I think we're going to move on to our wrap-up section, so I will let Sparky Collier jump in on that.
Yeah, thank you so much to everybody who participated in this session and the previous session, all of our moderators for this whole week, to really take us into the wrap-up for what we've been discussing all week. Jonathan, Bryce, and Tariq Perez are going to take us in there, and the moderators throughout the week, feel free to jump in as well and participate as we go through some of the stuff we've learned and how we can get engaged post-event. Take it away, JB.
Thank you. Yeah, so I just also want to say thanks to all of the moderators for leading these discussions. These were quite large virtual discussions that we were having with 100 to 200 people over the course of the week, and that I would say is not necessarily a kind of a normal type of panel to lead when we're doing that virtually, and that's, I think, a really great job on the part of all of our moderators. So thanks for that. I have an Etherpad here for the wrap up. You can maybe drop that link into chat while I get it shared. Okay, people able to see this?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So I wanted to maybe start off and ask if anybody had any feedback overall on the event this week. As we've mentioned several times, this was event 1 in the series. We have 2 more coming up on hardware automation and containers in production, and so would love to get your feedback and any comments that the attendees and moderators have, so as we move forward we can keep improving them and making them even better.
Yeah, Prakash here. I'm really impressed by the OpenInfra Labs, which is a new initiative, and look forward to working with you, Jonathan, and others who are in the team. And it's a real good one for the future. That's my comment.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you. Yeah, I think that that's going to be a pretty useful project as it gets going, and really is relevant to a lot of the different topics that we've covered this week. Any other comments or feedback? Well, there is an Etherpad link in here as well, which, if you think of something, if you have any other thoughts or tips that you would like to send our way, then you can go drop them in that Etherpad, and we'll definitely be taking a look at that. You can also email events@openstack.org, and we'll follow up there too. So getting into some of the wrap up of the week, I talked about some of my highlights from the first and second days, and if any of the moderators are on, if you have any takeaways from your sessions, it would be awesome to hear what you thought were the highlights from the discussions, or anything that might be worth adding to potential follow-up activities. We have any moderators that want to get back on for a minute?
I thought I really liked the collaboration from everyone that was jumping in and chatting in all the sessions I attended. I don't know, I think the only thing I would say is, like, if there's a way to get even more people talking, that'd be great.
Yeah, I agree. I think today we had a lot of great interaction, and maybe just as we do it, a couple more times and have some more people come back in, then I think that's going to be a way that we get more of that interaction as well.
Yeah.
Any other comments?
I'm quite excited by the reboot of the OSOps tools. There seems to be some definite feeling that more people want to contribute their one-off scripts. So that sounds hopeful. I say one-off scripts, it always feels like it's bespoke to you, but then when you have these conversations, like this week, right, you go, oh, actually everyone's got exactly the same problem. Well, there's loads of people who share a problem, so that's cool.
Yeah. One of the things that I thought was interesting along those lines is that it seemed like when we got into, there were a lot of questions where the answer was it depends. You know, and I think that because that is often the answer, then, you know, you may not want to sort of like share the specifics that you know, because, you know, like it feels like you arrived at that because of your unique scenario, and in reality, a lot of other people are in that scenario. I think the OSOps discussion yesterday and the upgrade discussion to me were really kind of very obvious examples of that to me, where, you know, we probably have a lot more commonality than we realize, especially I think at this point. OpenStack and Ceph and Rabbit and all of these things, they're highly configurable, but after years of usage, it seems like there are some patterns that have really started to come together.
And it's also very
well,
difficult. Sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
It's also very difficult to see what those patterns are unless people start to share their experiences. And so it feels like you have this unique case, but once you start sharing, you realize that others have variations on the same issue. And once we start sharing and collecting those experiences, we're able to document those experiences in a way where, like, the next person will be able to realize that they have much more in common. So it's really more of like a snowball. And as we start sharing, we realize that we can build something better for everyone by just having more people sharing their story.
Yeah, well, I was going to say that along those lines, I think that that one of the things that I'd love to do for a few minutes here is and it looks like it's great, some other people have added to the follow-up activities list here. I would love to see if there's anything that we can get kicked off. You know, maybe things that we can mention in like the follow-up emails that'll go out after the event. Yesterday, I talked about how I thought the discussion around the planning and the strategies of upgrades was something that could be pretty valuable. Is there anybody else that is interested in that? I see that there's potentially an opportunity to leverage the Largescale SIG for that. But are any of you who threw out tips and tricks around upgrades yesterday, would you be willing to participate in putting together some docs around some upgrade planning and strategies? Yes, this is great. Share your name here. Again, I think that one of the things that stood out to me yesterday is, even though there are different deployment tools that people are using and different methods for managing the lifecycle of their OpenStack environment, it seemed like some of the things around validation and testing and rollback and planning and those kinds of things were probably really valuable, especially you know, for some of the OpenStack users who maybe haven't gone through an upgrade cycle yet. Well, add your name in the Etherpad around line 14 if you are interested, and I think that that's a good one to carry into the large-scale SIG. So John was just talking about the OSOps tools. I thought that also was interesting and exciting to see bring up. There's a wiki page around this already, and there was kind of a proposed structure for how things could move through. And I think this graph, I had kind of forgotten that this was on here, but I was looking at it, and I think it speaks directly to what we're talking about with like bespoke to me kind of tooling. But the idea with the OSOps tooling is there's a contrib repo that is really just about sharing your tool and putting that out there in the open. And if it's something that other people use or not, that's not really kind of the primary goal at the contrib level. It's just to kind of share the knowledge and share the tool that you have built up. If the community sees that this is really useful, broadly usable, and something that is kind of a more generic thing, then it can go into a different repo for the kind of generic tools. So I think that there are a few different kind of like models for sharing within the OSOps repo, and there's some documentation here around that. But I think that it would be great to kick that off again. Who has been involved in that? I know Eric McCormick was on yesterday. Looks like he's not on now, but I know he was on yesterday and talked about it a little bit. Is there anybody who is still on the call that was involved in OSOps activities before? No one. Okay. Well, now's your chance to join in. Yeah, this might be something to hit the mailing list with, and maybe I'll reach out to Eric as well. And also, I think that for the OSF team, this would be a good thing for us to perhaps promote and mention in some of the upcoming newsletters if we see that there's actually some interest and a kind of like a renewed level of activity around it. A lot of those repos, if you go look at them in Open Dev, it's been a while since they've had activity, but I think that that shouldn't stop us from going back there and revisiting the idea. Okay, let's see what else is here. So OpenInfra Labs, Prakash mentioned this one, and I said that I thought that there were quite a few areas where the OpenInfra Labs activities could be relevant. The kind of initial environment that is getting built out across the Massachusetts Open Cloud universities is an environment that's incorporating all of the common open source software that we've been talking about over the last few days. So it's OpenStack, Kubernetes, Ceph, Prometheus. There's Baremetal management in there with Ironic and some other things that are that I think they're looking to get upstreamed into Ironic. And what's great about it is, this is an environment that's actually live. It's running real workloads for these different research users, but they are committed to basically following along very closely with the upstream projects that they're deploying. So I think that there's a really great opportunity to see kind of how all of these projects interact with each other and integrate, and get feedback into the upstream development communities, but also share operational knowledge and experience from those as well. So,
Jonathan,
glad that we had them on. Yes.
Jonathan, do the meetings for these also go along with this large scale Wednesday meetings, or is it different for them? Open Lab, Infra Lab.
OpenInfra Labs has they have some other meetings that they do. They are on IRC. If you go to openinfralabs.org, they have kind of the ways to engage in the community. But they're on IRC. There's a group already in a channel there called, I think, OpenInfra Labs. And they do have some regular meetings. I know they've been doing a series on monitoring, which is been pretty interesting to follow as they've tried out different monitoring tools and have been working to get different metrics out of these open source services.
Yeah, some of the terminologies there still are not clear on the architecture, and so yeah, I'll probe into it. But essentially, it's a good one to pursue. On the Wednesday meeting, it's a IRC only meeting, the ones which you are talking about for the large scale. It's mentioned IRC Wednesday. OpenStack 3 meeting.
So sorry, which meetings are you talking about? They have there is an OpenInfra Labs meeting that I think has generally happened on Wednesdays, where they have talked about just different topics within the environments that they're building. That's separate from the Open Dev series that we kicked off this week. It has specific topics, and this week's was large scale.
I see. Okay, I'll follow up offline. Thank you.
Okay, yeah. And speaking of large scale, Thierry, maybe you can talk a little bit about the OpenStack Largescale SIG and see if anyone wants to join in on that too.
Yeah, sure. So the Largescale SIG was formed to facilitate running OpenStack at large scale. We had various groups tackling that issue in the past, but that was a new reboot of the various initiatives that we had before. And the goal was really to get operators of large-scale clusters to share their pain points, their stories, and try to detect what are the early limitations that operators encounter when they scale up, so that we can help feedback into development solutions for those first bottlenecks that clusters get when you start scaling. So we identified two goals for the SIG early on. The first one was pushing back the limits that prevent scaling within one single cluster and instrumenting the bottlenecks. So basically, when you have a single cluster, you don't do any availability zones or any cells to scale further. What are the first things that you run into that prevent you from scaling? And a lot of people will answer RabbitMQ falling down at this point. And so we've been starting to work with Line, especially for them to publish the code that they are running internally to instrument RabbitMQ, which allowed them to shard the RabbitMQ deployment that they had in very efficient ways to pass that bottleneck. So it's a good example of the type of things we're trying to do, which is extracting the knowledge that is inside those large-scale operating companies and push it back into the commons so that everyone else can also benefit. The second one, which is driven by Arnaud Morin from OVH, is to document the configuration options from a large-scale perspective. By default, the OpenStack documentation is talking about default values for configuration values, and sometimes those defaults don't work well at scale. So it's good to know which configuration options make sense to be tweaked at scale. And so that's also an effort that is ongoing. We rely on experiences of various people to build this new documentation. So we had the feedback from CERN, we had the feedback from Line, we had the feedback from OVH, but it's not enough to build a comprehensive documentation on configuration issues that you will encounter at scale. So we welcome new people to the Largescale SIG so that they share their stories, share their configuration files, share how they solved some issues that they had, so that we can produce that documentation and go forward. So those were the two early goals of the SIG, but obviously after this week we'll likely have new members joining and potentially pursuing other goals like documenting upgrade issues, or potentially working on other large scale type issues. It's really a forum for operators of large scale deployments of open infrastructure to come and share their problems and their solutions, so that we can all solve issues going forward.
Are there anyone using Kafka for their instead of RabbitMQ for OpenStack?
Well, there are people using Kafka, but they are not coming to the Largescale SIG yet. So I'm willing to welcome them.
Yeah, if you find some people, we would like to see them. Yeah, sure. Thank you.
And I should add that the next meeting is next week, so it's perfect timing for a follow-up discussion from this week. Wednesday, it's currently a Asia Europe friendly time due to our members being mostly in Japan, China, and Europe. But if we get a lot of participation from the US, we'll likely set up more of a rotating time for the meeting so that everyone can join in.
I was about to say, it seems like the next meeting is well timed. So, James, you were going to add something?
Yeah, I'm gonna try and start joining this. I think those will be really useful for our folks.
It's I think it's 1 a.m. your time, so.
Occasionally, I might join.
You can handle it.
Yeah.
But it'll be worth it. It'll be the best 1 a.m. meeting you've had. So speaking of James, Baremetal, I was going to say, it seems like a important follow-up here is the next Open Dev is all about hardware automation. And I thought the Baremetal discussion this morning was super interesting, and really it seemed like there was just way too much information to share, and so it's good that we have a another event coming up. I especially around the lifecycle stuff, I thought that was there's a lot of potential there. And I believe that we actually also have had a group working on a Baremetal Whitepaper that is going to get published. And I don't know, Allison, what's the plan? I'm going to put you on the spot here. What's the plan around the Baremetal Whitepaper that's been worked on by a group there?
So the draft is really far along. It's incredible, and it's pretty lengthy. So we are in a review process now, and then we're going to circle back with the Baremetal SIG on next steps in terms of publishing. And so honestly, that's another SIG that is worth checking out if that discussion today was particularly interesting. That group is definitely very active. I'm hoping that we can publish the white paper in the next month or so, but we're in the review process now. But if you're interested in getting involved, please reach out and I can drop a link in the chat. I know there's a few folks on that are a member of that group and who have helped with the white paper. So a huge thanks to those folks. It's really incredible, has a lot of use cases. I think it's like 31 pages right now. So it's definitely a lot of work that's gone into it. So huge thanks to those folks. And keep an eye on the OpenStack Discuss mailing list, because it's probably going to be one of the first places we hit when we publish it.
Cool. Yes, I think that that's, like Allison said, a lot of work went into it, and I think it's going to be a really good resource. And I wouldn't be surprised if we find other topics to dive into and create white papers or materials around after the next Open Dev event.
Yes, it has come long way. The white paper has come long way from what it was probably 3-4 weeks back. I think a lot of editions people have done an excellent job, actually. We need to put a closing on it, but that's the most important thing.
Okay, and then the final session that we wrapped with today was around edge computing, and again, really interesting. You know, it was nice to hear a lot of different topics that were touched on, and thanks Shuchen for moderating that. And I thought we were able to get a really broad set of input there. Wanted to point out that there is an edge computing group, and I think that they just finished the second white paper that they have. We heard about Starling X a couple of times, and some use cases that are in progress there, which was also exciting. 2 million cell towers in China. Sounds like a lot of cell towers to me. But that was great. One thing that I thought was interesting that was flagged in a couple of sessions was how networking was flagged as a challenge. And it made me think that maybe there's some follow-up that we should do around networking specifically. I know we had the HA networking session yesterday, but maybe even just non-HA networking, just networking in general might be a topic for another session, as it seems to have been a pretty common challenge that people are running into. So any thoughts or input on that?
Hi, Jonathan. This is Shu Chen. Can you hear me?
Yes, can hear you.
I think working is just I mentioned is strategy. I think and I thought of for
Shu-Chen, you broke up for me. I'm not sure if that was just me or if.
Yeah, you may want to drop it in the chat if the audio's having issues.
Okay.
Did you hear that? Was it?
Yeah, I can hear you,
though.
but maybe. Okay. Yeah, the poor network. Maybe it's late in here, China. I mentioned maybe we should draw more attention on the 5G and the edge, and how the how telco build the edge platform to implement their 5G construction target.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the point.
Okay, yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, it seems like you know, the more that we have been able to get people engaged, the more just really interesting information that we were digging out, and that I wanted to dive into even more. So I think you know, it's a good sign, and we'll have to keep some of these events going over the long term, I think. So those are the follow-ups and kind of the the highlights that stood out to me. What did I miss? Does anyone have anything that they want to add in? Any other points or suggested follow-up groups or activities or anything like that that maybe I didn't mention? Going once, going twice. All right, so final thing to wrap up with here. As we've said, this was the first in our Open Dev series. The next one will be in 3 weeks on hardware automation. So that's going to be July 20th to the 22nd. And this is, I think this is going to be a really exciting one, talking about all kinds of hardware automation, and really basically how do you deal with all the stuff that's in our data centers out there. As much as we like to virtualize and containerize, we still have data centers full of physical matter that we have to manage. So that's going to be the theme and the topic for the 3 days starting July 20th. And then a couple weeks after that, we will have containers in production. And this is a topic that I'm also really excited about. I think containers have been really hyped for years now, but we're seeing quite significant production usage in a lot of different areas now. And I think that as that happens, people find issues with networking or security or configuration management, and so August 10th to 12th, we'll be talking about those different topics and those issues. So you can register and join us for those at openstack.org/opendev. And then we are planning our Open Infrastructure Summit, which is scheduled for October 19th. And we have just opened the CFP for that. So you can go to cfp.openstack.org. That will be an event that has more presentations. So that's going to be more of a traditional type CFP here with speakers and slides and that kind of presentation versus our very dynamic discussion style like we've done for Open Dev. So if you have topics or use cases or anything you want to share, you can go submit your CFP at cfp.openstack.org. So I think that is it for my wrap up. So I was going to hand it back to, well, I was going to hand it over to you. So perfect timing. I'll give it back to Mark and Ashley to finish up here.
Cool. Yeah, well, I was just going to say something about the events while we're on this topic, because I just want to say thank you to Aaron and the whole OSF Events team. These events take an incredible amount of work behind the scenes that not everybody sees, and moving in and taking these events virtual was not something we expected heading into this year, but it's been great to see everybody adapt and learn all the new tools and figure out how to configure Zoom. So thank you to the OSF Events team for putting on this event this week, but also they're already diving in and working on these 3 other upcoming events. So just want to say thank you to the events team at OSF for everything they've done on this. And then I think Ashley, if you have any last comments on this event, we can wrap it up.
Nope, I think you said it all, but thank you again, everybody. And we look forward to seeing you at the next couple events.
Sure. Yeah, I hope you had a good time with Open Dev.
Prior to that, on the tracks, you got multiple tracks. Can somebody be nominated for 2 tracks?
Sure, they can. Yeah.
Is this a summit question?
Yeah, that's a summit,
CFP?
because you got NFP, 5G, and then you got the AI/ML and so on and so forth. So
yeah, feel free to send me an email about that, Percussion. I can.
Sure.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Appreciate your involvement, everybody helping us put together that summit coming in October, and as well as these other 2 events. So it's going to be great.
It's not going to virtual, right?
Yeah, so the summit, we have not specifically rolled out the details on how we're implementing it. You know, the original plan was to have it in Berlin. So right now we're at the stage of just opening up the CFP and getting the presentations in. I think that, you know, in the next couple of weeks, we'll be able to share more about how we're implementing it. So I think it's likely it will be virtual for obvious reasons, but right now we're just focusing on the stage of getting in all the great topics and folks that want to help with the, you know, track chairs and all that stuff. But good question.
Thank you.
All right, well, I think that's it. So thanks everyone, and join us in a few weeks.
Yeah.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.